Welcome back to Triton TV. So this is a video that I've wanted to make for a while now. I was originally going to go to New Mexico and start a series called Triton Talks, where I basically talk to somebody about a subject in detail, kind of like podcast style episode. So the episode that we're doing today, obviously by the title, is my roommate's reaction, who is a professional pilot, and we're going to go ahead and keep the details of at what airline secret, just to keep his professional, life separate from this. So we're gonna go ahead and introduce you to my roommate here, and the video we're gonna be watching is this video here called "I Crashed My Plane" by a pilot of Trevor Jacob. There's an ongoing FAA investigation into this video here, so I really want to get my roommate's perspective as a professional pilot. And this is my roommate here. This is Mr. Dylan. Say hi to YouTube.
What's up, YouTube?
Okay, so can you briefly explain what your professional experience is as a pilot and your qualifications? What type of certifications do you
So I'm a commercially rated multi-engine pilot with an instrument rating. I have pretty much all the ratings besides an ATP. I fly cargo and people around Part 135, and that's pretty much it.
ATP, what is that?
Airline Transport Professional.
Alrighty.
Airline Transport Pilot.
And so how many years have you been a pilot, and how many flight hours do you have on record?
I've been flying since I was 19.
How old are you now?
I'm 22 now.
So about 3 years?
Yeah, and I have 300 hours, which is pretty low.
Yeah, but you're still getting into it. You're on a contract to become full-on pilot. Is that?
Yeah. So I'm working towards my 1,200 hours to be a 135 captain, and then
what does that mean? What does 135 captain mean?
So Part 135 is charter. So instead of an airline has like scheduled flights, you book a ticket on the airline. Basically, you schedule, like the customer or the client schedules the plane, and you show up based on what
chartered flights.
Yeah,
chartered flights.
So
okay.
Instead of having a scheduled flight, it's just a commercial flight that's not scheduled, or it's like scheduled by the client. So the client calls you like, "Hey, we want to fly 10 a.m. tomorrow." Cool.
So your schedule's a little sporadic then, would you say?
Kind of.
All right, so here we go. We're gonna go ahead and play the video. Yeah, for whatever reason, I can't screen record the desktop on this laptop. I just got it, so we're just gonna do this setup here. And then anytime you want to talk, just pause it and then give us your expert opinion. Are you ready?
I'll see what I can do, yeah. Alright, what does it say? Let me read this.
Okay. I'll go ahead and read it for the thing. On November 24th, 2021, I took off to the Sierra Nevada mountains, which is in California, to shred my best friend Johnny Strange's ashes. I plan to document the entire trip and make a video sharing the adventure. So go ahead whenever you're ready. Actually, did you think anything was weird with what he just did?
He didn't really show you anything. He just showed you the jumping out part.
But did you hear what he said before that?
No, what did he say?
He said, "Oh, I got an engine out and I'm over the mountains." So keep that in mind.
Some commentary for the viewers.
Yeah, just keep that in mind there. He is, it's a pretty popular YouTube video. So this says, during the flight, I experienced an engine failure over the mountain. There was no safe place to land. I jumped from my plane and deployed my parachute. Does anything about that seem a little odd to you?
So yeah, I wouldn't necessarily be flying with an parachute. Or I said "and" parachute.
Whatever.
I wouldn't be flying with a parachute unless I was doing acrobatics. So
okay. So like a stunt plane.
Yeah. So you're required to wear a parachute when you're doing acrobatics. Otherwise, you're not really wearing a parachute while you're flying, unless you're like very paranoid.
Okay. So can you explain that concept right there? Because what? I've read a lot of the comments, and a lot of the other pilots have said the exact same thing.
What?
So why don't you fly, for those non-pilots, why don't you fly with a parachute?
Because your wings will fly just fine. As long as you're flying good.
Okay, and even there's procedures for engine out, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we'll get to that in a sec, because that's what I wanted to hear from you. So go ahead when you're ready.
All right. You're right. Notify the NTSB and the FAA.
That's proper technique,
good. Yeah,
right?
you always want to make sure you notify the NTSB.
And the NTSB, for those who don't know, what does that stand for?
The National Transportation Safety Board.
Okay, so they oversee flying as well?
Yep.
Okay, and they work in tandem with the FAA when there's reports for...
Kind of. They do all of the crash investigations and come out with a report, and usually what we do as pilots is we learn from other people's mistakes.
Okay, so when he says he's notifying the FAA and the NTSB, that's the protocol if you crash an aircraft, is you're supposed to let everybody know.
Yep.
Okay.
NTSB 830, that's what it is.
That's like the code of... Oh, okay. It's like he knows what he's doing here. Okay, when you're ready.
Let's see.
Oh.
Please fly with a parachute. Interesting.
What's happening? How's it going?
Oh, you know what?
Trevor Jacob.
You can pause it.
The runway. Yep.
So we're gonna skip his little ad here once he gets to that, but yeah.
They go fly the 1940 Taylorcraft up to Mammoth and do some paragliding, do some snowboarding. It's gonna be a super good time. I got my best friend Johnny Strange's Ashes with me. We are going to go paraglide on one.
I hate to laugh, but wouldn't you want, if your friend was going to spread your ashes, to maybe be in a little bit classier of a bag or something?
Is it called an urn? That you keep
yes.
in?
So that's something a lot of people have talked about as well, and they're like, man, must have been a really small person.
Yeah.
Now, if somebody got cremated and maybe they wanted their ashes to go to multiple people, I could see having that small little amount, but...
Yeah. I mean, if it is the ashes, I don't want to be disrespectful, but...
Yeah, so the Ziploc bag, I mean, I feel bad for his buddy, but, you know...
Yeah. It's like he's... But...
That's kind of what a lot of... Okay,
out.
yeah, no, you're good.
Here in Nevadas and spread some of those, so I'm super grateful he'll be joining us. Got to give a shout out to the Ridge Wallet.
We're gonna...
I have a wallet.
Yeah, I do too. We're gonna skip his ad. Okay, so... Here we go.
Doing the run-up, and we'll be on our way soon. So, much love.
What's the run-up?
So run-up is before you take off in a piston engine airplane, you basically test the engine to make sure it's working fine. So you'll, at least in a Cessna, you'll go to about 1800 RPMs.
What percentage of max throttle is that?
Ooh, it's probably 60% max.
Okay, but you'd never fly at 100% throttle, right?
You do on takeoff, yeah.
Okay, but only on takeoff.
For a piston engine, yes.
Okay.
Standard procedure is full power on takeoff.
Okay.
In a piston engine.
Okay. Now you keep mentioning piston engine, so you don't do a run up in a jet engine?
No, sir.
Okay. And why not?
You get up and go because they're made to be fast. They cost a few $1,000s an hour to run, so
okay.
You don't want to waste. Run ups take like 5 minutes, so that's a couple $100.
Okay, so it's the fuel cost. And
kind of, jet engines are made to like get up and go. Because like if you say you have to transport a liver, you want to throw the plane on, you do your flows, and you take off.
And the flows are like the pre-flight checks and whatnot?
Yeah, everything is kind of broken down. So you have your checklist, and then you have your flows. So you'll like hit all your items, and you kind of do it in a sense that makes order.
Okay, and there's always like checklists, right?
Order that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of like cargo pilots, they'll do flows backed by checklists. So they'll do everything and then look at the checklist, but yeah, I got everything.
Okay. But I guess innately you should kind of know your checklist by that time, right?
Yeah, and then in a crew environment, you're like the pilot flying will be flying and then the pilot monitoring will be running the checklist for the pilot flying. So you'll do everything as a crew. Okay.
So it's a system of redundancy. Like you're always checking each other to make sure.
Yeah, like when you leave your house, phone, wallet, keys. It's the same thing, but more.
Yeah, I always do that. I do that actually. I'm always like keys, wallet, phone, headphones.
Yeah,
and then
or whatever else.
Okay, so this is the equivalent of before you leave your house.
Yeah, so you'll do the run up right before your takeoff. So a lot of airports will have a little run up zone. You'll just scoot over to the side off the taxiway. Some airports you do it right on the taxiway.
Okay.
But you'll pretty much bump your throttle up. You're gonna test your magnetos, and you want about
That's part of the ignition system, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the magneto is just a spinning magnet that creates an electrical field.
So they don't have. Is that for the spark?
Yeah.
So they don't have. Do they have spark plugs?
Yes. 2 spark plugs per cylinder. I think these are the Dash 8 engines on the Taylorcraft.
Okay, so you know this is a Taylorcraft. What you think?
It's a BD-12.
Okay.
I think they're called.
I think that sounds right.
It's basically a Piper Cub, but a side-by-side. It's the same designer that did the Taylorcraft and the Piper Cubs.
Side by side.
Side by side.
What do you mean by that?
So like, you would sit next to me.
Oh, I see.
But
okay. So you're talking about the cabin.
A Piper Cub's a tandem, so you'd sit behind me.
And those are tail draggers too, aren't they?
Yeah, so is this one.
Okay. This one's, it doesn't seem as angled, because when I think of a Piper, I feel like they're pretty far. Like you can't even see. Maybe I'm thinking of a different plane.
No, it's about the same. That's called the angle of incidence. So.
Okay.
It's about the same.
Like that natural stance.
You can change your angle of incidence by putting bigger tires on it. So if you have bigger tires, your angle of attack just on the ground.
It would raise the front of like significantly.
Exactly.
Okay. Cool. Whenever you're ready.
All right, let's go.
See you in the air.
What's that?
So he's got the outside view.
It's got to go from the tail. Yeah. His tail looks a little shaky. Maybe it's just the camera. I don't know.
He's really happy about that bag. Yeah, it is kind of dirty. His plane's dirty, huh?
Yep.
Alright, so this all looks like normal flight, right?
Yeah, looks pretty good. Looks like the engine's sputtering out.
Oh, well, that could be the frame rate of the camera, right?
Oh, yeah, I guess. I was anticipating it.
Oh, yeah, he's...
Holy I'm over the mountains and I had an engine out.
Man, he's yanking and banking that thing, huh?
It's not banking, but he's playing with the
yoke.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pause it right there. Okay.
It.
So, I want to hear your thoughts about what he just did there.
So he jumped out of the airplane, and
so he had an engine out, right?
Yeah,
he said, "Oh, I'm having engine problems, and I'm over the mountains." What do you think about? Okay, so his engine's out. He looks like he's what, 5,000 feet minimum above these mountains.
It's hard to gauge, especially with the camera.
Yeah, well, especially the fisheye lens GoPro.
Yeah.
But you would agree he has quite a bit of altitude.
Yeah, it's probably a couple thousand feet above those mountains.
Okay, so does any of that seem weird to you?
Yeah, I've never met anyone that jumped out of it. Usually you glide it all the way down to the ground. But...
Okay, so what are I've heard there's a saying for whenever you have an engine out, or just in general, what are the 3 priorities of flying a plane?
Aviate, navigate, communicate.
Okay, and I heard those, and a lot of the comments in this video also talk about that exact. What does that mean? Aviate, navigate. What was the third one?
Communicate.
Communicate. Okay,
or coordinate.
So he obviously failed to aviate at this point because he's not. He's no longer in the plane.
Just ditched it. Yeah. If this is like a legit scenario, if you do a parachute and you're in the mountains and you have nowhere to land, I would jump out too.
Really?
Yeah.
Now,
But having a parachute is like I've never flown with a parachute. So
and my old roommate, he used to fly a Cessna 172. Now he has a Bonanza something or another.
A36.
Sure, that sounds
G36.
yeah. Sorry, Chris, I don't know the name of your plane.
So there's a V35, the A36, the G36, and there's a bunch of other models.
Okay.
Those are like the main three.
Are those twin engines? The Bonanzas?
So the Bonanza comes in a twin form, and it's called a Baron.
Oh, okay. So
So
if it's just called a Bonanza, then it's probably single engine.
Yeah.
Okay. Prop, right? Propeller planes?
Yep.
Okay, so you would aviate, which means fly your plane, right?
Yeah. So there's a little bit of a different checklist you run for an engine out.
Which is?
But like overall, yeah, you want to aviate, so you fly your plane first and foremost. Because
Okay.
you can't do anything else if you're spinning out of control.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Navigate, so after you have the plane settled in, you have control, then you figure out where you're going, and then communicate.
So like pick a landing spot, for example. That would be navigating.
So that goes into the engine out procedure in a single engine airplane.
Okay.
It's a little different than what you're probably thinking.
Okay, so aviate, navigate, communicate.
That's just like the general guidelines.
This is true.
For how you should prioritize your flying. For an engine out, it's, I mean, you still, those rules apply, but your first thing, it's an A, B, C, D, E checklist.
A, B, C, D, E.
Yeah.
Which is?
So airspeed, best glide.
Okay, stop there, because I've read a lot of comments about that as well.
All right.
What do you think of the way he was pitching the plane? Did he...
It's pretty nose down attitude, what it looks like. I mean, it could be the camera.
Well, he did just jump out, so let's go back a few seconds, right
That's
before
also
he
true.
jumps out.
It changes your center of gravity when you jump out, so that'll pitch your nose down.
Because there's less weight in the front of the plane.
Less weight. I mean, your center of gravity in this plane is probably a little bit, it's probably right around here.
Okay.
So he's aft of CG. So when he
That would
jumps
cause
out,
it to want to come
it's going to
up.
cause it to pitch the nose down.
Okay, because where he's at, if he's behind the center of gravity, it's like a cantilever and it's pulling the plane up.
Exactly.
But when that weight's removed from behind the center of gravity.
Yeah, so like an airplane's always going to tend to want to put its nose down because the only thing keeping the nose level, keeping the plane level is there's downforce on the tail. So that weight times arm weight times arm equals moment, and it's the same idea. If you have lift at an arm, that equals...
Yeah, because that's torque, because the distance from center of gravity...
Force times distance is torque.
Yeah, so the...
Moment is just a stationary torque.
Okay,
right?
So from center of gravity to where the force is being pushed down on the rear wings, that would be a torque
so that's
pushing
your
down.
Horizontal stabilizer and elevator over
Okay,
here.
sorry, my terminology is a little
wings.
off here. So horizontal stabilizer,
Yeah.
and then what did you say?
Elevator.
Elevator. An elevator is what you use to
Yeah, it
control.
goes up and down.
That's
So-
what you control pitch with.
Yeah.
Correct.
So if you pull back, that brings your elevator up, and the air is going to come over it, push your tail down, which will bring the nose up.
Because there's more force on the top.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's generally how a plane flies, just so you kind of know. But there's downforce on the tail, so it doesn't need as much downforce on this tail because he's aft of CG. I mean, I don't know where the envelope is on this plane necessarily, but I'm assuming it's right here. So if he jumps out, there's not going to be enough downforce on this tail. So the nose will
Without
go down.
without rudder input, or without what did you call it? Elevator input.
Yeah, elevator.
Okay.
Exactly.
So now you said pitch. What did you say? Pitch for
Pitch for best glide.
best glide. So meaning, just by the sounds of it, you want to go as far as you can.
Yeah.
Okay, and that would probably be slightly nose down, so you keep your speed.
It's not necessarily, it's not nose down. It's actually like a little bit above horizon.
Oh, okay,
Or
so you're
not above horizon, but like your level flight, maybe you have like 4 fingers on top of your panel, and the horizon's right here.
Okay,
So maybe like 2 fingers. So you actually pitch up a little bit, I think. I mean, every plane's different, but
yeah, okay, that could be based off what you're saying, like center of gravity, and every plane's going to have its own natural tendency to either pitch up or pitch down, I guess.
yeah.
So
I mean, all planes kind of fly the same, so.
yeah. So okay, so he jumped out pretty quickly. It seemed like as far as the editing is concerned, it seemed like he lost an engine and jumped out like 30 seconds later. Now, he may have edited out some stuff here. Yeah, so let's continue here, and then I want to get more of your thoughts, because there's a lot of pilots. There's a lot of pilots in the comments.
We didn't finish our checklist, though.
Which is?
The ABCDE one.
Okay, let's continue.
Or do you want to finish our checklist?
No, let's do that. Let's do the checklist. So.
All right. So, airspeed, best glide.
Okay.
B is best place to land. So you're looking around.
So you're going to be surveying the land and picking a ravine, maybe something like that.
Yeah, actually, this looks pretty solid. I mean, this plane will land in 300-400 feet. I mean, you're going to be landing in some bushes, and you'll probably flip over your nose, but it's better than ditching it. I mean, doesn't look like there's any houses or anything around here, so it's like relatively safe.
He's above the Sierra Nevadas, apparently, right here. So
that's my biggest concern with ditching a plane is where's it going to end up. And
if you know, you'll find out here in a sec.
If you know it's not going to hit a house, I mean, then I would do it. If this was a legit scenario.
All of your other things didn't work properly. You couldn't find a landing. You didn't feel like you had enough airtime, even though you're pitching. I'd imagine when you said pitch, what did you say? Pitch for best glide.
Pitch for best glide.
So I'd imagine that's kind of a game of if you're pitch
airspeed.
Game. So it's you're trying to keep your airspeed high enough to keep your lift up to stay in the air, but then you might have to nose down a little bit to gain a little bit of speed, and then maybe pitch back up, a little bit of that.
No.
Or just literally finding the sweet spot.
So you have a lift to drag ratio, and there's a lot of you can get into here, but essentially it's your best glide. It's going to be where your induced drag and parasitic drag are at a minimum. So they kind of come in like this.
Induced drag. That sounds to me like if you pulled up a lot, you're inducing a lot more drag, perhaps.
Yeah, the more lift. So induced drag is a byproduct of lift.
Okay.
So the more.
So in that, was I right then? In that case, if you're trying to gain, well, I guess that's elevator lift, right?
I mean, yeah, you're gonna have drag on your tail, and you're gonna increase the angle of attack on your wings, which will make more lift, which will induce more drag.
Okay. Now, what did you call the drags again? Or
you have parasitic and induced.
So induced.
And you have skin drag and all that, but for sure.
So induced is user input.
Induced input is the byproduct of lift. So you can't have lift without induced drag.
Okay.
And it's just like comes with lift.
Just the shape of the wing is causing induced drag in and of itself.
Yeah.
With air flowing over it.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. And the other one, parasitic.
Parasitic, yeah. So that is a nonlinear equation. So the faster you go, the more parasitic drag you have. So if you're going slower, you have less parasitic drag.
Yeah, okay. So it's kind of like the air resistance.
Yes, exactly. Like all the friction, skin drag, and all the drag that comes just from your airframe moving through the air, pretty much.
Parasitic. And you said you want to keep those to a minimum. Is that what you said?
Yeah, you want your induced drag. So the chart or the graph kind of comes in like this, and right here is your best glide.
I'll try to find a picture of that and insert it right there at that point when you're talking about it. All right, so that's as far as the drag. And then that was, what was that, B? Where are we at on our checklist?
So yeah, best place to land. And then C is going to be you run your checklist. So I didn't see him run a checklist. I mean, he could have.
Yeah,
like,
and with
the camera's weird. It's always weird, like if you're editing something and you don't show things. I mean, he could have very well have done a checklist, but I don't know.
Yeah, and we'll play because there's only like 2 more minutes of footage before the actual real whatever happens. I'll just say that.
All right.
But so checklist and then D.
All right. So you do your checklist. C is kind of 2 things. So you run your checklist.
Okay, and then you do
so see if you get your engine started, and then if you can't get your engine started, then you're going to go through your checklist again, but this time you shut everything off to reduce fire and.
Okay, so that's it. We need to talk more about that. Okay, so in this case, engine out, checklist over the mountains. what do you think the checklist is for this plane? Or
For
at least
this plane?
in general, I guess.
I've never flown the plane, but it generally goes like mixture full forward, fuel's on both, fuel pumps on, or fuel's on the proper tank. And this, I think it's gravity fed to a hopper tank.
And so there's a fuel
Goes to-
selector left, right on this
Yeah.
plane probably. And you're,
It
you
might
said,
be a both switch. I mean, some are left, right, both. Some, I mean, some tanks have 5 different, or some planes have 5 different tanks, and it gets wild. But
so you're making sure the engine's getting enough fuel, is what it sounds like.
yeah, so you want to make sure that you didn't do anything stupid, like your engine-driven fuel pump has gone off, but if you put on your electrically driven fuel pump, that'll get the fuel going back.
So that's part of the checklist in some is to force the fuel back into the engine.
But I'm not sure if this plane has all of that fancy stuff, because like some of these planes don't even have electrical systems, so
It's all like vacuum and stuff from the engine.
There's a vacuum gauge. You got your pitot-static system, but yeah, they don't have an alternator or a starter, which makes your plane a lot lighter, but you have to go and hand prop it every time.
Now, but at some speed, you are having force on the propeller. So
yeah, you have drag on your prop.
So when you're already at an airspeed of whatever, that's an option, right? To use airspeed to get the propeller going, I think.
Kind of. So if you lose your engine, generally it's going to windmill.
What is that?
It's when you're, I guess I'll call it negative torque. So instead of your engine spinning your prop,
okay, I see why you're saying
the
that.
wind is spinning your prop, which is in turn spinning your engine.
Okay, yeah. So basically the propeller is connected like basically straight to the crankshaft.
Yes,
the
direct
engine.
drive. Most of these tiny airplanes are direct drive. So if your engine's spinning at 2,000 RPMs, your prop's spinning at 2,000 RPMs.
Okay, and so you're saying, yeah, the whole windmilling thing. Now, what causes engine outs?
A whole lot of stuff. Usually, you have like a crack or something. And
Loss of pressure?
yeah, like a loss of compression due to a stress fracture in your cylinder. That's a big one. Spark plugs, usually not a big one because you have 2 of them per cylinder.
Okay, which is what the run-up was all about in the mag checks?
Yeah.
You're checking those redundant systems?
Sometimes it's bad flight planning, so you could have not enough fuel to make
Okay.
it.
So that's an interesting... Keep that in mind, too, because that's not enough fuel. So if you run out of fuel, no matter what you do, you're never getting that engine started again.
Pretty much, unless you might be able to get it started and run off vapors for like a minute.
But not long. You
Yeah.
can't run long.
It'll be long enough to like help you out a little bit.
A maneuver or two. Perhaps a 180 degree
Like if
turn.
you're about to be 100 feet short, you can now make your landing zone.
Okay, so it's not going to change much.
Yeah, it might just like spin up and then die.
Okay, so
I mean,
where
it all depends on the day.
where are we at in our checklist again now?
We did A, B, C, and
C
you
was
do
the
C again.
checklist.
So you'll run your checklist, you'll go through everything, make sure everything's turned on, and you don't have any fuel shut off switches on or off, all that good stuff. And then you'll go back if you don't get your engine started, and you'll do it again. So you'll cut the mixture, shut off the fuel.
In
fuel shut
reverse
off.
then almost?
Same order, same flow, but
But the opposite
this time,
input.
this time going back.
Instead
and
of
shutting
cranking the fuel up, now you're turning it off.
So instead of mixture full rich, you're gonna cut your mixture.
Okay.
Instead of, your fuel selector's nothing, but you'll shut off your fuel. There's usually a fuel shut off switch
Okay.
or a valve that you'll pull, and then you'll make sure you'll turn off your mags. That's another thing I didn't mention earlier. You'll make sure your mags are on both.
Okay, and that's like I said, the ignition of the cylinders.
Yeah.
Okay, so you cut your fuel.
Boost pumps, whatever your plane has that is involved with fuel, pretty much. Make sure all that's on.
Turn all
And
the
then you
fuel
make
off.
sure
Everything
If
that
it
has...
doesn't get started, you turn everything off. And then after that, you're going to declare an emergency. So,
That's part of the communicate, part of aviate, navigate, communicate.
yeah, so that's like the last thing you'll do is declare an emergency.
So that's interesting. Okay, so what they teach you, it sounds like in flight training, they teach you solve the problem first and then tell other people, hey, I have a problem.
Yeah, fly the plane first, because if you don't fly the plane and you get too slow and you're uncoordinated and you throw your plane into a spin, and you can't recover, there's nothing else to be done. Like you just
you're gonna die in this
Yeah.
fiery inferno. Okay, that makes sense.
so
So
you
you
make
do.
sure
So in this
make sure
case,
you have your airplane in order, and then you make sure you get everything else done.
okay. So and then
like talking to ATC is the least of your worries
okay.
until you get everything done. Then it's like,
But
right,
they might notice if you're in a flat spin. They might notice. Hey, you've lost 1,000 feet in the
it'll
last.
be too late.
Okay.
Definitely too late.
Well, they
Unless I mean, these planes are pretty easy to recover from spins.
Mhm.
But if you're in like a multi-engine plane and you VMC roll your plane,
What's VMC
you're
roll?
done. That's a whole thing.
What's VMC roll?
VMC is minimum controllable airspeed. So
Velocity. Oh, so it's just what you
velocity, minimum control.
Oh, I see. So you've lost. You're literally not flying the plane anymore at that point.
Yeah, well, essentially you have asymmetric thrust. So if you lose an engine on a multi-engine and you get too slow, this engine over here, which on the right would be your non-critical and traditional twin, but it would just torque you all the way around your spin.
Oh, I never knew those. I never knew that would.
Oh, it happens.
So if you get too slow, I guess you'd call that like, it's like an angular torque on this. Like if you're talking about the center of mass from front to rear, what is that? Aft to, how do you say that?
Your longitudinal axis?
Sure. What's the proper term? What's the front of the plane called?
The nose.
Okay, well, nose and,
Nose and tail.
Okay, I'm thinking of boats then. You know how they have like aft and
The stern and
there you go.
the bow. Yeah.
So, okay, in this case, what you're telling me, if you have a twin engine plane and you are below the minimum, what did you call it,
minimum controllable airspeed.
Okay, so let's say your stall speed is 50 knots. It's somewhere around there.
Yeah, it's usually around your VSO, which is your stuff out airspeed.
Okay, so this is fascinating to me. So if you just boiled down the plane to a single line and you had your, you had your axis of the plane and then you had your center of gravity, or center of mass, I guess, and now you're applying a torque over here, but the plane is no longer being kept in the air, you're saying that what happens is the torque out here, let's say it's your right engine, is still on, your left engine is out. You're flying so slow that the plane is not being stabilized from the forces of the air coming this way and the force of being pushed that way, that the torque, I guess it'd be like this, like angular torque from the center of mass,
exactly,
would cause the plane to spin that way. So do you shut the engine off?
Yeah, the recovery procedure is to reduce your angle of attack. You would stomp on your rudder. You're probably already full rudder.
Counter rudder. So if you're spinning left, rudder to the right.
So you would step on the active engine. So if say your left engine has failed,
because the right engine would cause you to spin to the left.
Yeah, full rudder. So the only thing counteracting, there's a couple things counteracting your asymmetric thrust, but a big one is your rudder, and then you can also use your bank to get a vertical component of lift, which helps out with
I see.
your rudder.
Wow, so you really do not want an engine out of those...
horizontal component of lift.
Yeah, I see. You really do not want... I know this has nothing to do with this plane, but...
almost irrecoverable. Like you're almost...
Like you pretty much have to cut the engine and dive to gain some vertical lift.
Well, like what you do is you pull back your throttles and then pitch the nose down.
Yeah, you're basically trying to force it to go more into that roll, I would imagine. So
no,
you're trying to fight the spin, but you need to what did you increase the angle of attack would be further down to gain some airspeed. You need airspeed in that situation. That's the only thing that's going to save you.
Sure, because it's going to go over your tail.
Because we need
to get rid of that asymmetric thrust. That's a big one.
Yeah.
And then you need
you shut off the engine.
You don't shut it off. You pull your throttle back.
Okay. Yeah. I don't.
Because you still want to.
You want to keep the engine
running,
but you want to get rid of the spin.
Asymmetric thrust.
That is fast. That's terrifying.
I haven't done a.
I just had like the most terrifying mental image of that.
There's a crash in Addison, Texas that you should look up.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out.
It's a VM. So, King Airs have auto feather on their props. So if you lose an engine, I'm not sure if it's an
it'll cut system.
It'll automatically feather your blade to reduce the drag on your prop.
Oh, I've heard of that. So the variable pitch blade, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
So they can
Constant
change
speed prop, but
oh, so the speed stays the same. It's just like a helicopter.
well, you select your speed and then you have your torque, and I mean, turbines have different parameters than you would use in a piston engine. Like a piston engine will be manifold pressure, RPMs, and
I see.
stuff like that.
Oh, so that's a turbo prop. Is that what they call them? Turbo prop?
Turboprop.
I see. But interesting stuff. So we'll continue with this, but that's absolutely terrifying to me.
Yeah,
to
you
get
should
it.
look at the Addison, Texas
I'll have
crash.
to check that out.
Right after takeoff, they had an engine failure, and they, from what I hear, they didn't have their auto feather on, and they VMC rolled right into a hangar. There's a
I think I've seen it actually.
pretty bad video.
But that would have been just like, let's say 90 degrees to 180 at the most, if you're that low.
You kind of like flip over.
Yeah.
So, yeah. and
Like
it's-
this.
It's really hard to recover because you have these two giant weights on your wings, and if they get moving, it's hard to get them to stop. But
yeah, it's like a
this plane,
fidget spinner.
you have a pretty solid longitudinal axis, and there's not a lot of weight on your wings,
Mm-hmm.
so it's easier to manipulate your roll tendency, or like if you're spinning,
Yeah.
it's easier. If you just stomp on your rudder, it'll stop your roll.
Okay, so we're gonna
For the most
focus
part.
on this. So we were at the communicate, or we were at C in your ABC. This was the engine out
So no,
checklist.
we already did the D. So declare emergency.
So hey, mayday, mayday,
Sure, you could say that.
or whatever. You tell them your tail number.
Yep.
I'm crashing.
Yeah. So pretty much, yeah.
And then what's after that?
Well, I guess we can get into more details about the emergency, but
Sure.
well, 121.5 is your emergency frequency, and you'll
Oh, so there's an actual frequency
it's called guard.
for.
So all the controlling towers or controlling agencies will listen on to guard, which is the emergency frequency,
Which was-
121.5.
121.5.
Yeah, and you'll so like this guy, he probably wasn't on a flight plan or anything. So what you would do is go to 121.5 and declare emergency.
And give them as much info as possible,
Yeah,
right?
as much as you can. Yeah, pretty much.
While
And-
you're scared for your life and trying not to die, I would imagine, obviously. Because you have limited amount of time in this scenario, obviously.
You actually have a lot more time than you'd think. Like a lot of people freak out.
Well, that's why I asked about his elevation. Let's say he has 3,000 feet of elevation. He probably has at least 10 minutes of flight. If the winds aren't like headwinds.
I'd say a little less than 10. I mean, these planes are probably about a 10-to-1 glide ratio, which is pretty standard.
Is that distance to feet?
So every foot you lose, you can glide 10 feet.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so
It's about 2 miles per 1,000 feet, roughly.
2 miles per 1,000 feet. So if he's 3,000 feet up, of the peaks of the. Now let's say there's a field down here, and there's no more mountains. He's 3,000 feet above the mountain. Let's say that's a 1,000-foot mountain. So then he gained another, what'd you say, 2 miles, something like that.
Yeah. So like theoretically, you can get 10,000 feet out of 1,000 feet, and miles 5 to 80.
Yeah.
So it's about 2 miles.
2 miles.
Little,
Okay.
little less
that
than
makes
2
sense.
miles.
So you declare the emergency, and you switch over to that emergency frequency in this.
Declare
instance.
emergency, and then they might ask you if you need services or something. That's usually at like an actual airport. They're like, all right, we'll roll out the fire trucks for you.
But he's not in an airport.
Yeah. So what they'll do is send out helicopters or something. I mean, once the ELT goes off, then it's like, all right, we're gonna go search for this airplane.
What's the ELT?
Emergency locator transmitter.
Okay, because I've seen that acronym in the comments as well.
Really?
So let's finish the video. There's only about 2 more minutes before the entire scenario unfolds.
We didn't finish our checklist yet. No.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, we're gonna
Alright.
finish this check.
The last one is egress, or so egress or execute. A lot of people say. In this scenario, his E was to jump out of the plane. But like, usually egress is like open up your doors, because if your airframe crinkles up, you might not be able to open up your door.
Oh, it's like in a car when you're about to go into the river. They want your windows up, I think. Or no?
Do they? Well, you can't open up your door if your window's up.
No, they want them
because
down.
of the pressure.
They want it down. That's right.
Yeah,
You're right.
all
you're
that
right.
pressure's in.
But there's a point you have to wait until the water comes up enough.
To neutralize that pressure, yeah. Because you're going to have so much force.
Okay, so in a plane, that's kind of the plane equivalent, is crack your door.
Sure, yeah.
In case
open up the doors.
But maybe not jump out just quite yet.
Yeah, I mean, from the looks of it, this guy looks like he skydives and base jumps and
he does.
He paraglides and all that.
So are we done with our checklist?
Yep, that's pretty much it.
So A through E.
Yeah.
And it's the engine out checklist.
In a single engine airplane, yes.
And then let's just go through the names of each step real quick.
Alright, airspeed best glide, best place to land, checklist, declare an emergency, egress.
Boom.
Yeah.
There we go.
That's the checklist.
Alright, let's continue.
Alright, I'm excited.
So he's going full send.
There's a nose pitching forward.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's almost immediate. Well, it is immediate.
Yeah.
And obviously it depends on what the last input was.
Kind of. I mean, that goes into stability, dynamic stability, which is a whole nother conversation.
Man, he's still got his headphones on.
He does. That's interesting that he has his headphones on.
I think they're gone now.
Cruising. Yeah, that's just the wind spinning your engine.
So that's pretty interesting. So I feel like there's a little bit cut out here. You saw how much higher the plane was just a second ago, right? And now the plane's way, way below him.
That's interesting. I didn't even think of that.
I want you to see that real quick. So, see how high up he's looking?
I mean, he does have a...
He's looking way, 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 way up. He's doing a bank. He's turning. And now the next shot, it's like 1,000 feet below him.
I think that's pretty accurate, though.
Well, the plane's going to fall way faster than the human, correct, right?
Well, has a... No, a human would fall faster than a plane.
But not with the parachute.
With a parachute, yeah, then the plane would fall a lot faster. So he probably...
Especially if he gets into it.
Yeah, like he's cruising with his little parachute, and I can see the plane coming in right under him like that.
So there's about a minute left of this whole scenario here.
I wonder if there's going to be a fire.
Not looking good.
Looks good to me.
Well, he's like alive.
That was a pretty solid spot to land.
Where? Hold on. That?
Yeah, look right there. Land right there.
That's what every other pilot in the comments also said.
Really?
And they also noticed that the views of whatever direction is this way now or whatever, none of those views were shown in a certain cardinal direction, indicating that possibly maybe there's a lot more of that. So
it looks like a dried up river, so there's probably a ton of solid little gravel bars around that area.
Oh man, here we go. Oh, I don't want to watch. Oh man. Ugh. He sure got a lot of angles of that.
Yeah, GoPro's mounted on there.
And you notice too, he has a GoPro with him.
Yeah, but if you're filming a YouTube video, you're gonna have different shots.
Some other people noticed some interesting things. He's got one like strapped to his wrist or something, and a lot of people have said that they've never seen any other pilot YouTuber have that perspective. Like, It's only shown when he
Like
jumps
the
out.
shot he had when he was gliding.
Yeah. So, because I would think the least of your worries is grabbing your GoPro.
Yeah.
When you're in a real emergency. So there's a lot that happens. He ends up going to the plane and getting his GoPros back. He actually carries his parachute with him and walks for 5 hours and meets some farmers, and they save him, and then he goes and paraglides the next day and spreads his friend's ashes or whatever. So I don't know. Does any of that seem weird to you? As far as, I mean, you did say it's a little weird to have the parachute. He jumped out. There's no footage of any communications with ATC, no declaration of emergency. He might have done it. Yeah. There was no in-cockpit view during the emergency, the engine out. And there was no fire at all. So there must not have been much fuel there, or the plane got ran dry or something, is what a lot of people are saying. So I want to hear...
Is there no fire? Can we watch on?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Get me out of this. Oh.
What a horrible spot to land in a parachute.
Yeah, that doesn't look fun.
He's making sure to film it all, though.
Yeah.
That would hurt. There's no doubt about that. That hurt.
Thorns? Are they thorns? This looks like dry.
It's like dry bushes.
Yeah.
But they're really thick.
20 minutes later.
I guess I should
We're going to skip
probably dock my own.
to where he gets to the plane. So he does find the plane. So this is the plane here. No fire whatsoever.
Holy shit. There's literally nothing. No anything. No water. I had a water jug in the back. Oh my gosh, dude.
One thing I noticed too,
Where I am.
I think he's actively blurring the tail number. Every shot, it's like impossible to see it.
Really?
Yeah, watch, you'll see.
Just very slightly.
God, thank you, universe. Thank you, higher power.
Oh. Can you see it?
Well,
you can look up who owns that airplane.
Yeah, there's an FAA report, and it's linked to this video. So that's...
Does he own the airplane?
See, here's what's weird. This is the first time he's ever flown this plane in his YouTube videos, and he does own a plane, but this was not his plane. Or he might have bought it
to do this.
So, before I even put anything else in your head, do you think this is a suspicious scenario, or do you think maybe he just isn't the best decision maker, or maybe since he's an adrenaline junkie and he had his parachute on the entire time, and that was not a emergency pilot chute. That was a full on jump rig. Like,
yeah.
Does that seem weird to you at all?
Yes. Some airplanes do have parachutes, like little rocket repelled parachutes.
But this is
on them?
Probably way too old. I think the Cirrus has those, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's like they've only been had those for what, 10 years or something?
Something like that.
They're very new, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
BRS, Ballistic Recovery Systems.
Nice. Got the acronym. So
that's the company.
Any other thoughts as far as...
I don't know. There's just a lot to unpack, I guess.
Yeah.
I think the biggest red flag is flying with a parachute. It's like he planned to.
Well, and the camera.
And the camera. I mean, that doesn't really trigger a red flag for me that much. Because, like, people that do shoot YouTube videos, their first instinct when anything happens is like, oh, I'm going to pull up my phone and
yeah, I guess so. So there's no fire. We don't have any footage of the emergency engine out. Maybe the plane got ran dry. Maybe it was purposeful. I don't know.
I mean, it did look like the plane was gliding pretty good when it crashed. It wasn't like a straight up nose down.
No, not at all. And the propeller did windmill, so the engine didn't lock up.
Yeah.
So that was something a lot of people pointed out. Yeah, it just, to me, this seems pretty staged. It seems like he went and bought the junkiest airplane he could find that still flies, and planned to run out of gas. So maybe he at least thought about that part and was like, I don't want to start a fire. But the inconsistency of the shots, that's what's really interesting too.
But also the fire thing. If you know you're going to have, or not the fire, the gas thing, if you know you're going to crash a plane and you're trying to cover it up, fuel starvation's like a very common thing. So
that's what a lot of people have said. Almost all the comments, like, it's crazy. They've dissected this crash to frame by frame, essentially. And so that's why I wanted to hear your opinion. I think it's totally fake. I think the guy's going to lose his pilot's license over this. But, you know, there's no fire. Like, I'd imagine it's really hard to not catch a plane on fire crashing at those speeds.
It looked like it was gliding pretty good. So I'm not sure what the threshold is for how fast you have to go and how much fuel you need to start a big fire. But if your plane does have fuel and it crashes in a pretty nose up attitude, it probably won't catch on fire.
You're saying if it's stalling and like kind of falling out of the sky at the last little bit or something like that.
Yeah.
But in this case, I mean, you saw it's probably going at least 80 knots. I'd say that's bare minimum. I could
probably a little faster.
That's what I'm saying, at least.
Yeah.
It was hauling.
Maybe like 110 knots.
It was fast.
And the V&E on these planes are pretty slow.
V&E.
Yeah.
Velocity of...
Your never exceed speed.
Oh, I see. And that's when you're overspeeding the engine, essentially.
The wings, or the airframe.
Oh, you're literally too much force on the airframe.
Yeah.
But I'd imagine that's higher than engine overspeed.
Well, engine overspeed is a different thing.
But I would imagine they set the engine up to where when it's over revving, essentially, the airframe should last faster and more force than the engine should ever put into it, even in a nosedive, I would imagine.
Yeah.
I would imagine. So, whatever, that's neither here nor there. But it is crazy. There's no fire. Some of the views are... Here's what a lot of people say. A lot of people say that it looks like there was some spliced image of... Because he's looking up, plane's up there, and then it's way down, way below in a totally different area. Some people think that he might have got some footage beforehand with somebody else flying the plane or something, and then added in this footage of the actual crash. I don't know. That's so hard to tell with video editing. It's hard to tell.
Maybe. Like you see the nose, how the nose initially came down.
Yeah.
As it builds up airspeed, the tail is getting more authority. So then it'll eventually pull the nose back up.
Yeah.
And then eventually it'll get so slow, then the nose will go back down. It's called a phugoid oscillation.
Yeah, that makes sense. But that's like with zero bank. Yeah. Like the perfect scenario would be the plane would fall, gain so much speed, it's going to get way too much lift, and then it's going to nose up, stall, nose down, and then repeat that process.
Yeah.
But if there's some bank to that, it possibly could, I don't know.
These planes are designed to correct for bank, so if you ghost ride your plane, you probably shouldn't bank, or in theory it wouldn't bank.
Probably more so with zero wind, I would imagine.
Yeah.
It's more likely. Either way, that's crazy. So, do you have a final verdict? Or do you think there's more that needs to be seen?
I'd like to see more, I guess.
So, yeah.
I don't want to draw any conclusions, but I think flying with a parachute, and he's like telling everyone to fly with a parachute, I don't know. You should be a competent enough pilot to not, like your first...
And not go somewhere where you absolutely feel the need. Because honestly, I'd rather ride the plane out to the ground, especially in something that has a stall speed of like 40 knots.
Yeah.
You should... Worst case scenario is you get to a point where you don't have that good of a landing and you're pitching up and you let it hit into like the side of a hill. Worst case scenario.
Yeah. Generally, what happens with that is people spin and then they die for certain. Because they'll see approaching terrain rising and then they'll pull up to try to match it, but they do it way too far out, or, even with their engine running that happens, and then people pitch up. They'll keep pitching up, and eventually they'll stall. And spin.
Yeah.
And then,
but I mean, the ravine was a good point because a lot of people pointed that out. But a lot of people did mention you can't see a certain direction. I think it was like southwest or whatever. So he said all the views from that direction are edited out, possibly to, you know, mitigate anybody giving him crap because maybe there's a huge open field in that direction, or I don't know.
Probably.
So I can understand the professional perspective of not wanting to call him a liar and staging this. I think it's totally staged. I think the guy's losing his license over this and might even get charged with negligence. Because that could have started a fire. But if he premeditatedly starved the engine, at least he covered that base and mitigated a possible forest or, you know, fire in the mountains. So I feel like I learned a lot.
But I don't know. Fly your plane until the last second.
Exactly. That's just like a captain of a ship, right?
Yeah.
Like usually
if like I was over a city, I'd rather take out myself and no one else than make it and then, you know, crash into a house and burn up someone's house and kill a family, whatever happens.
And that's what he got a lot of crap for, is that plane could have smashed into somebody's like farmhouse or something.
Yeah.
Because you really have no control. Once you jump out, that plane could go anywhere within reason.
Within a reasonable
distance. Within, you know.
But it didn't look like anyone was around there.
No.
So at least that was good.
So I guess we'll find out in the coming days. I'm going to bookmark that FAA investigation. Well, apparently they keep them open for 10 days to the public to see, and then I think it all goes kind of through their channels. So
NTSB report. They're fun.
Yeah. Well, thanks for your review. And
how'd I do?
I think you did great. I think you noticed some of the things that a lot of the other people were talking about. And it is kind of weird that you would think, because he says that I want people to, I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning. He says that maybe people can learn from his mistake, or learn from this video. I don't think I would have this courage. So he said, I didn't think I would have the courage to share this footage, but I feel a lot of pilots can learn from my experience. If you actually want people to learn, where's your radio emergency call? Where's your checklist of what you tried to do to get the engine going? That's pretty suspect to me. If you really want other pilots to learn, that's the most important thing in an accident investigation, is
a real world application of the procedures that you're supposed to have done, you know.
So to me that seems like the most, and to add a sponsor to this video adds like a whole nother level. and then the ashes from the friend, it's like he's trying to me it seems like a sociopathic liar. It seems like you're trying to appeal to people with like, oh, I have a noble cause of spreading my friend's ashes, and then you throw in the Ridge Wallet sponsor. that seems kind of tasteless at that point. It's like you're trying to get your money. You're trying to appeal to people's, you know, emotional side. I don't know. I learned what I wouldn't do, because honestly, I have the same opinion. Because think about Alaska. Alaska has like more pilots than any other state in the U.S. You have all these bush pilots, planes like that. I think all of those pilots in those places, I think they rarely fly with parachutes as well. Because as long as your control functions are working, you can fly that plane until it hits the ground. And that's what most of those people do, is like you said, they fly the plane until you pick a ravine and you land it there. It might not be the best landing, but the goal of an emergency landing is not to have a smooth landing. It's so you don't die and don't hurt other people.
Yeah.
So you fly the plane. So what if you break the landing gear, you break your propellers, you detach your wings. At least you make it out of it.
Yeah, and especially, sounds like his base jumping experience, he could have took the plane a lot lower and been like, all right, this isn't going to work out, I'm going to jump now. Instead of like first resort, all right, I'm going to jump. It's like a serious pilot.
Now, and
pull the chute right away.
There is the fear aspect. People do weird, irrational things in fear, but pilots are trained to be calm and cool. And you're trained for engine out, right? As a certified flight instructor, isn't that one of the last exercises you do? Is an engine out simulation?
It's one of the first things you do.
Oh, okay.
Like,
do you do
first
them?
10 hours? Yeah.
Do you do them on takeoff?
Not in a single engine. I mean, you do aborted takeoffs.
But you don't do a simulated engine out on takeoff.
You do, but it's very mild. It's like the instructor. So what you do is if your student forgets to keep his hand on the throttle, you pull the throttle on him so he remembers to keep his hand on the throttle.
Oh man, it must be kind of fun to be a flight instructor actually, because you get to kind of like your life is kind of on the line, so you don't.
It's not that. I mean, you should be able to anticipate what your student is gonna put you in before he does it. So like if before he or she does it. So like if you're base to final and you're about to spin, you should know that you're about to do that way before it happens.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Correct it.
But I learned what not to do. I don't think I would have jumped out. Like you said, if I'm an experienced skydiver,
I would have taken it way lower and then jumped out.
I think you only need a couple 100 feet, and at that point you can pitch down, get some speed, or let's say you glide it, and then you still have 300, 500 feet above the hill. I feel like as a base jumper, you should be more than comfortable with that. And as a pilot, you should know how to slow the plane down so you can jump out properly and not get killed by the tail or something in some weird...
That doesn't usually happen.
No, I know, but if your
velocities are equal, so once you jump out, you should go right down.
Okay,
you shouldn't fly back towards the tail.
No, but let's say you pitched up too much or something, and you jump out as the plane's going to fall back or something stupid like that. As a decent pilot, you're not going to let that happen. My point was, you should be able to get the plane way closer to the thing, and which would probably be way safer for where it's going to go crash as well. You can have a way better idea. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I would have made sure that I wasn't going to make the landing before I would jump. And you can tell pretty, like you can get pretty low, and then if you're definitely not going to make it and you have a parachute, which is like a very rare thing in itself, then I would jump. But I wouldn't, like, first resort, jump out and pull a chute. And then, yeah, that's what a lot of serious instructors are telling people. It's like, if you have an engine out, just pull a parachute.
Oh, yeah. But that plane is totally different from the, like, if you're in a flat spin. That's what I think that's what they're for, right? The Cirrus, I think that's
for
why.
Whenever you need it.
Yes, but
mid-air collisions.
I think that was their intention. So we'll call it at that. I can understand why you don't want to accuse the guy of anything, but I think he's a liar, and I think this video is going to get him in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, he's kind of self-incriminating. Like, he could have, if he wanted to go base jump out of his plane, he should have done it and not filmed it and then put it on YouTube. No one would ever know.
Yeah, but I mean, you gotta get the money from it, right? He's gotta...
Sponsored.
Now, here's the thing. If there's an insurance claim on that plane, you can guarantee that they're gonna go through this footage and ask him for the raw videos, right?
Yeah. Like, I deleted them.
So, we'll see. We'll call it that. Thanks for watching the video. I have a shitload of editing to do on this.
Lots of talking.